Welcome back. Now things are looking pretty good. We have the ability to grab a weapon and swing it, and we're almost ready to start causing damage. But before we do that, I'd like to be able to put the sword away. I'd like Echo to be able to place the sword on her back and draw it out. That way we'll have two states. We'll have the unequipped and we'll have the equipped state, and we can switch between the two. So we're going to do that in this video, which means we need arming and disarming animations. So this will bring us back to Mixamo. So back to Mixamo, I went to animations and searched for Axe. And very important, I'm still using XBot, as that is the skeletal mesh that we have in our project. Now I found that in the Axe animations, we have a standing disarm over, that's this animation here, and there's an arming animation as well, a little bit farther down. So I'm going to download this standing disarm without skin. And once I have that, I'm going to search for the arming animation, which is unarmed idle. So I'll go ahead and download that also without skin. Now, once those are downloaded, I can place them in my assets folder in Mixamo animations right here. So I'm going to show my downloads folder here. And I'll go ahead and move these straight over into my animations folder. And now I can import them into my actual project. So I'm going to go into my Mixamo folder in XBot, Animations, and click Import. So going into the folder where I have these animations, I have Unarmed Idle and Standing Disarm Over Shoulder. That's the full name for it. So I'll go ahead and click Open and select my XBot skeleton and go ahead and import all. So now I have standing disarm over shoulder, which I'm going to go ahead and rename to disarm. So taking a look at that animation, it looks great. And I'm not seeing the arming animation. And that's probably because I downloaded unarmed idle. That is not the animation I was looking for. I was looking for an animation for pulling the sword out, and it was actually this one, unarmed equip over. That's the animation I was looking for. So I'll go ahead and download that one. So I'll go ahead and get that animation over. So moving it to my animations folder. Now I can get that one. So unarmed equip over shoulder. That's the animation. So I'll search for XBot and get that animation in as well. And I'm going to go ahead and rename this one to arm. Actually, arm and disarm are a little confusing. I'm going to call this one equip, and I'll call the disarm unequip. And taking a look at equip, that's what it looks like, and it looks great. Now we can retarget these. So that means I need to go to my Mixamo XBot rigs folder and open my IK retargeter. And I can double click my equip animation, see what it looks like. And I think it looks good. Feel free to make adjustments to the pose by clicking edit pose and seeing if you need to change that. Let's take a look at unequip. And I think that looks pretty good as well. So now we have animations. And this means we'll need a way to play these animations. And we know that we can play animations using montages. So in our blueprints folder, we have characters, animations, and here's our attack montage. We're going to want a montage for arming and disarming. So since these animations look good, I'm going to select my equip and unequip animations and export selected animations, choosing Blueprints, Characters, Animations for the folder, and click OK. And now I can see how these look retargeted. And we still have the preview mesh for the sword attached to the socket, so we can see how this looks. And I think it looks pretty good. Now, you can adjust this as you need by adjusting that pose before retargeting, but I think this looks pretty good for equip. I'm going to take a look at unequip really quick just to make sure that it looks good too. And I think that looks just fine. So this means we need a way to play these animations, and we can do that with animation montages, as we've seen with our attack animation. So we're going to go ahead and make a montage for equipping and unequipping. Now, we can make a montage directly from an animation by right-clicking on it and going to Create up here at the top and selecting Create Montage. And I'll call this AM for Animation Montage. And I'll call this Equip. And we can have Equip and Unequip both in our Equip montage. So here's the montage, looking great. And I can open my asset browser and search for Unequip. And I'll take my Unequip retargeted and drag it on in there. And I'd like to have montage sections. So I'm going to right click in the montage bar here, right next to default, new montage section, and call this section Equip. And holding Control, I'm going to middle mouse wheel to scroll in and bring this over to the beginning and click and drag until I can get that default section. And right-click Default, delete montage section. And now we have an Equip section right there at the beginning. And between the two animations, I'm going to right-click, new montage section, and I'll call this one Unequip. And I'm going to control mouse wheel to scroll in and make sure I have Unequip right there at the correct spot. And as I always do when making montage sections, I'll go to my Montage Sections tab and hit Clear, and that way we'll only play one montage section and won't run into the next one once that section is done playing. So this is looking good. We now have montage sections. We need a way to play those montage sections. And we do know how to do this already. We're doing it for our attack animations. Let's just remind ourselves how we're doing that. So we'll go back into /character.h, and we can simply Control F to search for montage. Here's our forward declaration for UAnimMontage. And then here's our montage functions where we have play, attack, montage. And if we keep searching for montage, here's our animation montages variables. We have a variable for the attack montage. We can now have a variable for our equip montage. So I can simply copy this variable, uProperty and all, and just beneath it, paste that variable. And instead of attack montage, we can call this equip montage. And it's still edit defaults only category montages, so we can select this in the blueprint in the details panel. Now we need to decide when to play this animation. And if we go to /character, here's our E key pressed function. And we check to see if we have an overlapping weapon. If we do, we equip the weapon. But I'd like to be able to put our weapon away if we're not overlapping a weapon. So the E key can have multiple uses. Now, if we wanted to, we could tie this to a different key by adding a new action mapping and binding a callback to that. That's another way to do it. But I'd like to show you how we can use the same key for multiple actions depending on the situation. So the behavior we can have is if we're overlapping a weapon, we can equip that weapon. But if we're not overlapping a weapon, we can check to see if we have a weapon and play the equip montage jumping to the appropriate section. So this means that we need to know if we even have a weapon, because if we don't have an equipped weapon, then we shouldn't play a disarming montage, right? So what we can do here is if we don't have an overlapping weapon, in other words, we have an else case here, then we can check to see if we have a weapon equipped, which means we should take a look at our character's state. Now, character types shows us that we have a character state, and we are either unequipped or equipped with one of these other weapons here. And we also know that we have an action state, which is either unoccupied or attacking. So we really shouldn't be equipping or unequipping a weapon in the middle of an attack. We don't want to interrupt that animation. So we should also be unoccupied. So we have a couple of conditions we should check. So in /character, let's check those conditions. So we'll have an if check here. And the first thing I'm going to check is to see if we have the unoccupied state. So I'm going to check if action state is equal to action state unoccupied. But we should also check to make sure that we have a weapon, which means we should have our character state either equipped one-handed weapon or equipped two-handed weapon. So either one of those is okay. In other words, we should just not be unequipped. So we can say, and character state is not equal to character state unequipped. So if we're not unequipped and we are unoccupied, then we can play that montage. Now, we should also check to see if that montage has been set. So we can have another and here and say and equip montage. Now, this is a pretty big conditional for an if statement. And as we've done before with our attack animation, we made a bool returning function that checks to see if we should be able to attack. And we can do the same thing when checking to see if we can equip or unequip. Now, I know this is a little confusing because we have an equip function on the weapon, and that means something else. Here we're talking about arming and disarming, so arm and disarm might have been better terms. So we can use those terms when checking to see if we should play this montage. Now, I'd like to play the unequipping montage, right? The montage where we're placing the weapon on our back. So I can make a function that returns bool called can disarm. So let's do that. And this function can be protected. And I'll have it right here at the end of the protected section. It'll return bool, and I'm going to call this can disarm. And I'll go ahead and make a function definition for can disarm. And it's going to check those conditions that we're checking here and E key pressed. So I'm going to highlight the contents of the conditional here for the if statement and come back down to can disarm and simply return that condition. And I can place each part of it on its own line so we can better see what's happening here. And now I can simply call can disarm to see if we can disarm. So I'm going to go ahead and call that function here in the conditional. And now we know we can play that montage. Now we need to know if we should play the equipping or unequipping montage section. So I'm going to come back here into my montage. And I see that these sections are equip and unequip. So we're going to want to play the montage. And we've already checked to see if equip montage is set in can disarm, so we're okay there. So we can simply play that montage here. Now, how do we play a montage? Well, we know how to play a montage because we have play attack montage. And if we look at that, we see that we're getting the anim instance, calling montage play, and then choosing a section name and jumping to that section. So we can make a play montage function for equipping and unequipping. So we'll go back to /character and make that function. I'll put it just above can disarm. It's going to be a void function, and I'm going to call this play equip montage. Now, play equip montage doesn't need to select a section at random. We actually want to choose whether to play the equip or unequip section. And to have one function that lets us choose that, we can simply have an fname input parameter called section name. And we can simply pass that name in. So let's define play equip montage. We'll do that right here. And I'm actually going to move this down to under play attack montage, as these are similar functions. So I'm going to Control X to cut it and paste it just beneath play attack montage. And it's going to be very similar to play attack montage. We want our anim instance, so I'm going to copy this line where we're getting the anim instance and paste it right there. We also need to check if anim instance. Now I know that we're checking the montage in our can disarm function, but it might be better to just check it right before we play that montage. So I'll go ahead and remove that from this conditional and check it instead in play equip montage. So we'll say if anim instance and equip montage. Now let's take a look at play attack montage. We see that we're taking the anim instance and calling montage play. We can do that same thing here in play equip montage. The only difference is the montage we're going to play is equip montage. And we're going to jump to a montage section, but we're passing in an fname for that section. So we can copy the line where we're calling montage jump to section and paste it down here. The only difference is the section name we're passing in is the input parameter. And instead of attack montage, we're going to play equip montage. So now we have this handy little function that we can call to play the equip montage and pass in either the equip or unequip section name. So going back up to our E key pressed function, if can disarm returns true, we can call play equip montage, passing in the F name, and the name is going to be the unequip montage section. Now, if we don't make it inside this if check, that means that can disarm returned false, and this function will return false if our action state is not unoccupied or our character state is unequipped. So we need to know if we should be able to get that weapon back out, which means we need a function called canArm. So let's make that function. It'll be just under can disarm, and it'll return bool. So we'll make this canArm, and we'll go ahead and define this, and it'll be just under can disarm. And this function should check to see if our action state is unoccupied. So that's definitely one of the conditions. We'll paste that right there. But this time we should be in the unequipped state. So we'll copy this line and paste it here, but we'll change it from not equals to equals. So now that we have this check to see if we're in the unequipped state, we should set that unequipped state if we're putting the weapon away. So back up in E key pressed, if we are playing the unequip montage section, we should set our state right after that. So we can say character state equals E character state, and we'll set it to unequipped. And as soon as we're no longer occupied, we should be able to arm that weapon. So we'll place another if check, and this will be can arm. And we'll call play equip montage, but this time the section name is going to be equip. And we're going to set our character state, since we'll be unequipped, but this time we'll set character state equal to E character state equipped one-handed weapon. We're not handling two-handed weapons at this point in time. Now, you may have realized that there is one case where we shouldn't be able to arm the weapon, or disarm it for that matter. And that's if we don't have a weapon. Because now we're checking our unequipped status, but we could have a weapon on our back and be unequipped now. So what we should have is a variable for our currently equipped weapon. So we can go back to /character and add a variable for that. So in our private section, we're going to add a weapon variable. So we'll say a weapon, and we'll call this equipped weapon. And I'd like this to be a U property. So it's participating in reflection and garbage collection, but I don't want to be able to change this from the details panel. This will only be changed in gameplay. So I'm going to give this visible anywhere and category weapon. And scrolling up to the very top, I did not have that class forward declared. So I'm going to forward declare a weapon. And as soon as we pick up a weapon for the first time, I'd like to set our equipped weapon variable. Now, here in the CPP file, we are including weapon.h. So as soon as we pick up a weapon for the first time in E key pressed, after calling its equip function and setting our character state to equipped one-handed weapon, I'm going to set my equipped weapon. And that's going to be equal to overlapping weapon. So now we'll have a variable storing the weapon we have equipped. Now, one last line that we need to add to this function, and this is very important, is we need to set our overlapping item to a null pointer. And the reason is because next time we press the E key after we've already equipped a weapon, we don't want that overlapping item to still store the address of the weapon we just picked up. Otherwise, we'll try to do this whole process again. We'll try to equip it again. We'll try to set the character state again, but we've already picked up that weapon. We only want to do this if we overlap a new item. So before setting our equipped weapon to our overlapped weapon, we're going to set that overlapping item to a null pointer And that way, next time we press the E key, we won't try to pick up a weapon that we've already picked up. So right here, we're going to say overlapping item equals null pointer. We'll set it to a null pointer first before setting our equipped weapon. And of course, you could set this after on the very next line here if you wanted to as well. As long as we're setting overlapping item to null, that way, if we press the E key again, we won't be trying to equip a weapon that's already equipped. And when we check can arm, we'll check to see if we have a weapon. So going down to can arm, we'll place an and here, and we'll check to see if equipped weapon is not a null pointer. Okay, perfect. Let's go ahead and save all and hop back into the editor. I'm going to save everything before I hot reload and hot reload. So now that we have a montage section, we need to go about playing the montage section, and we'll do that in the next video. I'll see you soon.